So thank you everyone for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transport. It's been a while, over a year since or maybe about a year since I last did this. I don't remember why I stopped. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna get back into it. I don't know at what frequency. The topic for today is specifically kind of EU cross-border rail, high-speed rail idea. But I'm going to be partly crayony, but I'm going to also try to think what the EU could be doing to affect that crayon, just because kind of everyone here wants, here being not Germany, here being the EU, want a bigger EU role in quite a number of things, and it's just not really happening. Often it's out of focus. Out of focus in the sense that the advocacy is unfocused, in the sense that that it's not in media focus, very much is. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to show you guys what the map could look like. This includes countries that are not in the EU but are in between other EU countries, so this means the United Kingdom in this case, so that's between France or Belgium, go that way, and Ireland. It means things like Switzerland, between Germany and Italy. With Norway is, I don't even know what's going on with Norway and the EU. They're not joining. I don't know if they're not joining yet. But so this might be not a thing that the EU would be funding. It is, which of these are good EU funding? How would the EU funding on this even work? And this also requires thinking out, not thinking out, that's not an expression, figuring out how much all of this would cost, just to understand what we're requesting that the EU do, what we're demanding that the EU do to improve infrastructure, EU-wide. Is the tunnel to Ireland worth it just to serve Dublin? I believe the answer is yes, but I don't, and I'm not entirely sure, but I believe the answer is going to be yes, especially if you assume that operations are going to be at the level of domestic French or German trains. Hi, you said something goofy that exposed you as an operations researcher because NP problems have a good approximation. Stockholm-Helsinki, yeah, that's there. Some of these things are not necessarily the top priorities. So, just to explain the problem is this is also a single color map, so this is a map of what the network would be. It's not a complete map. We're going to discuss additions and subtractions. There are, for example, a subtraction because at one point I drew a line that went from Katowice, a high-speed line from Katowice, and in Doppler, and then Wrocław, and then to Poznań, which is, for internal Polish purposes, not particularly useful. Essentially, it's a way of getting people from Katowice to Berlin a little bit faster, and then gets into questions like how much is it actually necessary as a Germany-Poland connection, which I'm not actually sure that this saves you that much time to get to Berlin compared with going like this and doing a curve that skips Łódź. And yeah, this might be a bit faster, but you don't need it to be a bit faster to justify something like 300 kilometers of high-speed rail. You need to be a lot than a bit faster. And also Katowice, this is about 330 if everything is direct, and it's not 350 or something. Yeah, this is a lot of money. Now, Upper Silesia is the second largest metropolitan area in Poland. Warszawa is at this point, I believe, bigger and gaining on this one. I'm going to talk about actually I should talk about the Polish context a little bit later than immediately, but no Rail Baltica. I'm going to add Rail Baltica. This is not complete. We're going to talk about additions and subtractions. So let's talk about additions. So Rail Baltica, for people who don't know, is an ongoing project that's actually happening to connect Warszawa with the Baltic with the main Baltic cities. So that's going to go to Kaunas, then Riga, then Tallinn, with a branch to Vilnius. I think there's also another branch to Klaipėda, but I don't remember. If there isn't, it should probably be added. Now, I believe in Poland goes through Białystok and Suwałki. Now, this is intended as a mixed project. It's not high-speed rail. I think they're talking about 200 kilometers an hour. Maybe 250 in theory, but it's one of these projects that's so mixed and the alignment is so compromised that 250 is just because why not? But it's not going to be run at the average speed that you expect of a 250 kilometer an hour high-speed line, of which we have a bunch in Germany. Restricted to these lines, they can average 140, 150. You wish a computational complexity course wasn't cancelled. I never even got to take a computational complexity course in undergrad, and it's bad because I was really interested in that stuff when I was in undergrad. I actually was. I was interested in a lot of things that were not pure math. Like I was interested in cryptography. It just was never really an opportunity for that. What do I think about Malaysia's high-speed rail? I don't actually know. Is that the one that's doing KL to Singapore? All I can say is great idea, but I don't remember about the execution. And I'm traumatized whenever I see either Singaporean or Malaysian construction costs. In fact, I was in Singapore last December. Let's not call it winter. Let's not beat that Eurocentric. And I, with the knowledge of how to look for these things, literally saw the extreme construction cost in Singapore and took photos. They're just very grainy. But I saw the station digs were about twice as big as the stations on the Thomson line. It is really bad there. So of course all of the British consultants, okay then I don't know, literally the only high-speed line that I've heard of that they're doing in Malaysia is KL Singapore. It's going to Penang or something. But anyway, so on this, like in Europe, so we have Rail Baltica, but again, it's a mixed line, and they're not going to average a lot because that's not really the goal of the line. Its goal is not to average high speed. The people who are building it are not thinking that anyone is ever going to take the train from Warszawa to Tallinn, for example. Like Warszawa-Riga is probably the biggest city pair in this, and if we're doing Białystok, Suwałki, Kaunas, I don't think it's actually going to go through Siargao. I think it's going to go through like this maybe? I don't remember. Like this, it's going to be, so this is something that high speed rail could actually do. Just bear in mind, Riga is not a big city. Riga, kind of famously, was about to cross the 1 million people threshold in the 1980s, which was the threshold. Oh, okay. This threshold, which was when the USSR would build US subway, and then it would. So they start having a Soviet-style metro plan with 3 lines meeting a Soviet triangle in the city center and all. But the Soviet economy in the 1980s was famously not very good, and then the Soviet Union collapsed, and the city has actually depopulated because of immigration, and so they never actually built the metro. Now, people in Riga will tell you that it is the biggest municipality in the Nordic and Baltic states. The Baltics, especially Estonia, but also something like that, Latvia and Lithuania, pretend they're Nordic. It's kind of cute. But it's kind of cute. I mean, I don't know how much you've heard about anti-Semitism in Malmö, which has a decent claim for the anti-Semitism capital of Western Europe. People in Malmö are amateurs compared to the Lithuanians. It is kind of ridiculous. But anyway, so let's talk about the Polish context of it now. It's not just Rail Baltica. It's also, let's call it all of northeastern Europe, which I mean Poland and things to its immediate east and northeast. Minsk would count if Belarus was not run by if Belarus were not run by Lukashenko. Ukraine does get a line to Lviv, probably should get two, one from Warsaw, one from here, one from Katowice and Krakow. So the context in Poland is by a pretty big margin the largest Eastern European EU member by population. It has nearly 40 million people. Number two is Romania, which is a little less than 20. I think it's 18 and decreasing, or 19 and decreasing. Poland also, kind of famously, has had quite a lot of economic growth lately. You have it in the World Bank, so need to find locations and hope that I'm not going to deal with any special problems with the database not liking being directly linked to, which does happen to me. I have no idea why it's checking New York City. I did not buy this laptop in New York. I bought this laptop in Germany. Yeah, so it's being annoying this, so I need to do it this way. So let's do Poland. So you may note that this is real. So this is adjusted for both inflation and PPP. So Poland has, since the early 90s, seen something like a 3.5-fold increase in its GDP per capita. Now compare this with Germany, and let's not talk about the degrowth we've had recently, or Russia. So Russia, people keep talking about how poor Russia is. A lot of it is cope. A lot of it is people thinking it's still 1997 here. Russia has always been, not always, not in the 1800s, but Russia has for generations been a middle-income country. It had a crisis in the 90s. It recovered in the 2000s. Its economic growth has not been amazing, but the point is that Poland went from here to here. Russia went from here to here. And by the way, that's not no growth. It's not the best growth, but it's better than the growth the USSR had in the 70s and 80s, for example. This is Germany, which also not the best, especially. Yeah. So I'm bringing this up because Poland is a country that is essentially converging with Germany at this point. I mean, children in Poland today, not all people, children, teens, maybe even very young adults, don't expect their lives to be any worse than those of their German counterparts. This was not true in the 90s. In the 90s, there was mass migration away from Poland, literally see this right here. There was some demographic momentum, but the population was trending down. Actually, has reinforced itself, especially now because their birth rates are very low. Poland, and this means a bunch of things. Germany, it really depends on so Germany essentially was once the third biggest economy in the world. Like in the 90s, it was the US, Japan, Germany. Especially if you did it by exchange rate and not PPP, because in 2000 China was already number 2 at PPP. And I don't think Russia ever fell below Germany. Maybe, yeah, I mean here... No, yeah, Germany was certainly ahead of Russia in PPP terms in the 90s. It's not number 3 in PPP or exchange rate terms now. Like, I mean, at this point, China might even be ahead of the US in exchange rate terms. And if it's not, it's very close. There's India, Japan. So anyway, I bring this up because in Poland, there was underdevelopment of the main cities, because the sort of people who would be migrating to Warsaw migrated to German cities or London instead. Uh, the upshot is that Poland is a rather centralized country. It's not federal. I mean, there's a lot of devolution. There is also a lot of not devolution there, and the rail network is very Warsaw-centric, and it's a bit France-like in that the idea is to give everyone some kind of one-seat ride to the capital. Which, for example, Czechia tries to run on a takt. I mean, it doesn't try to run; it runs on a takt, like in Germany. In Poland, they never really had this, massive development of the capital. Like, Poland is a country of, you saw, 38 million people. It's about somewhat more than half France. Somewhat less than half of Germany. Warsaw is a metro area of maybe 3 million people. Paris is a metro area of 13 million people. Berlin is, by Japanese standards of metro area, about 6. By German one, probably about 5. So Warsaw, which is a centralized capital, is about even as a share of population with Berlin, which very much isn't. It's just this kind of underdevelopment of the capital. Kyiv, by the way, is the same thing. And you want to compare this with maybe Madrid, just because Spain is maybe somewhat more populous, but not massively more so than Poland. Spain has more devolution. Spain also has a very strong second city, and that second city is substantially larger in population than Warsaw, and Madrid is about twice the size. No, but Japanese standards, the Berlin metro area is not a rural backwater village whatsoever, but Japanese standards, the Berlin metro area is slightly larger than Metro Fukuoka, and only about half of Japan lives in bigger cities, like Tokyo plus Osaka / Kobe / Kyoto and Nagoya. Their metro areas combined are about half of Japan. No, Berlin is not a rural backwater village. Japan has actual rural backwater villages that live off of... Okay, by Tokyo standards, I mean, manga makes fun of people from Osaka. Objectively speaking, Osaka is a big city. New Yorkers make fun of Jersey. To be fair, Jersey is, very easy to make fun of. So anyway, I bring this up because Poland is only now planning this. I could do different colors to explain what exists, what is under construction. I did it in my older map. But basically, the idea is this. The French network is more or less complete. The only things here that are not actively under construction are... so let's see, this does not exist, Lyon to Torino, but it's under construction. It's planned, it's funded, it's under construction. From Marseille to Nice, this is a plan. I don't remember if it's funded, but it's a real plan that is going to happen. It's also highly compromised. You might be able to tell this is a bit squigglier than, for example, this. They're making some speed compromises because the actual fast way to build is to branch at X, not make Marseille through a station, and then build like this to get to Nice. But there's a lot of NIMBYism inland. So they're going via coastal route to try to put Marseille, Toulon, and Nice on the same line. This is much more expensive. But again, happening. This does not exist, but happening. They're doing Bordeaux to Toulouse. This is Crayon. The plan is to get from Bordeaux to the southwest with a weird jug handle, and then only get to Dax. And then only get to Dax, and then this is Crayon. This is not seriously planned. This is unfortunately not seriously planned. But France is otherwise more or less complete. There's no third tracks in Paris, but this is not an EU concern. Obviously, Paris, London, Brussels is the more European international train system with the pricing of business travelers that makes everyone think SNCF is public enemy number one because it profiteers on this. No, it does not profiteer on things like Paris to Rennes, But if you think in European terms, why the hell would you even think about Ren ever? High Speed 2. This is the High Speed 2 plan as was at some point. Um, Essentially, all these lines have been cut beyond Birmingham and points north, but this is a real plan at least. The problem is British construction costs are not good. This is going to be about 600 million American dollars per kilometer. So this line has high costs for a metro tunnel, urban city center metro tunnel. This is the only thing here that is not currently planned, and this is something that you could contribute to if this is ever happening. Spain, essentially everything here is happening, exists, or is currently in the will happen bucket, by which I mean the Basque Way. This is not. This is a shortcut to get to Madrid faster. Madrid to Lisbon, they've wanted to do this for a while. I believe it was supposed to be funded, and then how Britannia rules the cost, really, Warners, I love you, but really. They're still making money. I think Spain is starting to build this. They ran out of money in the Great Recession and they cut it. This is like the Portuguese line is something that's been discussed. I don't remember its status. This is crayon. But again, this is crayon that like I didn't make up. Very little of this is crayon that I made up in this part of Europe. Italy, same thing. I think all of the, I don't remember. I think maybe Catania is not currently planned. I think Bari is. The international, the only thing in Italy, as far as I remember, that is genuinely crayon that I'm making up rather than relying on other things. So the first is, I think this is currently planned. So it's getting from Genoa to Nice, which is mostly a Nice to Rome thing. The line to Zurich is something that, I mean, the hard part, which is the tunnels across the base tunnels, exists. Hardest part has opened, which is this, the Goddard base tunnel. Zimmerberg is, I believe, funded for the next tranche of Swiss rail projects. Here, it's kind of weird. Like it's the Swiss situation. I don't like crowning Swiss rail Netherlands because it's like me telling the master what to do things. But I think in this case they're generally incorrect with their acceptance of very low average train speeds, just because they think that an hour is okay from Zurich to Basel and Bern, like on this triangle. This is not crayon. This is low speed and exists. This might be crayon, but it's for the Swiss to develop. This is crayon. But they're actually, they are fixing the approaches a little bit in Switzerland, but they're still thinking that Zurich to, I believe, Lugano is what they're planning to do in 2 hours. And the thing is, 2 hours for a route where you essentially have spent high-speed rail money. I don't remember if it's Lugano Castle. I think it's Lugano. 2 hours. I mean, they're saying that this needs to be 2 hours in the talk for 2035. But they've done all of the base tunnels through the mountains. It's something that if they want to do it in an hour, they could do it in an hour. Honestly, with all the mountain tunnels that are under construction or planning open. Yeah, you need to occasionally. I think they might need to do a cutoff here or something, but that's not the hard one. And they're just not really thinking in terms of speed, and they're certainly not thinking in terms of speed for trains between Germany and Italy, because they did build the mountain tunnels for freight between Germany and Italy, but that's because they wanted to get trucks off the road. Whereas the alternative for, let's say, Germany to Italy passenger travel is not trucks, it's flights. People aren't driving this. Not city to city, at least. If they're driving, yeah, it's a vacation where you're gonna go through the Alps or go drive to a ski resort or something. But if you're going from Milano to Germany, or from Germany to Milano, or I don't know, Firenze, Roma, or vice versa, you are not driving. You're flying. and the train, and so Switzerland doesn't care about that. But it's something that the EU could be pushing, and by pushing I mean funding. Same thing, Milano to here, they're not doing it. They are actually investing in Tyrol. So here are the mountain tunnels, again, it's not crayon. I believe the stuff that's being built pushes almost all the way to Innsbruck. And then on the Italian side, they believe 160 kilometers an hour should be, or 200 should be good for everyone, and it very much isn't. This needs to be a high-speed line. So, yeah, that's going to open, don't worry. Like, not everything in Europe sucks. So, I don't want to call it Romance Europe because Romania exists, but in, I don't know, not Romania, Romance Europe, there isn't that much to crayon. Things are happening. Belgium is kind of weird in that Belgium built high-speed lines. Let's not speak too much like a foreigner. Belgium built high-speed line, and it's very Belgium in Belgium they tend to run trains very fast. Okay, I can't actually get into an Israeli accent. It sounds too French. I've dropped my accent too much anyway. But anyway, so what I'm saying that they need to do in Belgium is essentially bypass Leuven, build a high-speed line to Antwerpen. Currently, the trains are fast. Brussels to Paris. They're insanely slow. They're insanely slow through Brussels for bad reasons. They're fast past Leuven to Liège and mostly toward the border. On the German side, they're slow. Liège itself is slow, which has a fix, but it's annoying. Antwerpen to the Dutch border connects here, which is the Dutch high-speed line. But Brussels to but Brussels to Antwerpen is slow. Brussels to Leuven is slow. It's kind of weird that Belgium has these high-speed lines that aren't actually faster city to city than medium-speed lines in Britain or Germany or Sweden. Is France expected to fill the Perpignan-Montpellier gap? Yes, that is on the agenda. I don't remember if funded. Or if there's a déclaration d'utilité publique on this, but there will be. And so it's mostly, so I'm pointing out these are mostly short sections that are missing. And they're missing because of, in Belgium, it's just weird planning. In the Netherlands, all of this is ground. This is currently slow. They've been talking about this. I doubt it's happening. I don't think anyone's talking about this. This is entirely crayon. This is, I need to make sure that this is the correct version of the Utrasse. They also dropped the Bremen. They're just doing this at this point. What I think is the correct way to do this in Germany is pretty crayon at this point, unfortunately. In Poland, Warszawa to Wrocław and Poznań is happening. This is my best rendition of the actually under construction route. They have medium speed. This is a medium speed line, actually, you can see it. It's a resolution where you see existing rail lines. This is a medium speed route that is used to get to both Katowice and Krakow. So what you need is to, in Poland, is to hook to the high speed line and get to Katowice and Krakow much faster. Katowice in this case is more important. Partly it's because Upper Silesia is a bigger metropolitan area than Krakow. Much less transit-oriented because it is polycentric, whereas Krakow is monocentric. Krakow is the second biggest municipality in Poland after Warszawa, but still more people live here than here. And it's kind of good for international connections here. So Poland is where they're starting to build in this and this. This is long-term crayon, but I didn't make it up, to Gdańsk and Gdynia. And note it is very capital-centric. I think I at one point tried to crayon some different kind of Y that maybe goes from Łódź to Poznan via a more northerly route in order to do something like this to get to Gdansk. But again, that's essentially if you're caring about service to Berlin. Obviously, domestic Polish trains do not. I'm not 100% sure this is an important European priority. I mean, I guess they could build this if they really want. I don't see this penciling out, but I don't know. I'm not actually going to give you ROIs on everything. Hey, Tyrannosaur. I did in fact return. Reservation for more highway lanes. I mean, we'll see. Yeah, it's from Amsterdam. I mean, and yes, exactly. It's from 200 because domestic. And yeah, so the reason I'm doing everything out of Utrecht is the understanding that the real is again trying to think of EU-wide network planning. So the first thing that you need to do is to kind of encourage this more, and not TEN-T. TEN-T is I want to say crayon derogatory is probably the best way to describe TEN-T. And then wait one second. And then understand what the big priorities are for international travel and try to fund them or work with member states on them. Where probably the most important role is to understand that the scope of international rail funding is not just across an obstacle. So this is the Fehmarn Belt. This is the Fehmarn Belt. This is actually getting built, this line, to connect Hamburg with Copenhagen and generally to connect Germany with Scandinavia better and bypass what is an insanely slow and low quality line that goes Hamburg and goes north through the border on the long way around and like this. So this is just gonna cut off this section and get and the thing is they're only building this. So yeah, they're gonna build some approaches, but they're not gonna be very fast. On the Danish side, they're going to be a mix of 200 and 250. On the German side, I believe a mix of 160 and 200. Because the idea is this, oh hi. Is it 4333, you know? I wouldn't really think about high-speed dual style, I'm just thinking in terms of algebra. And so anyway, the idea is to scope it between major city and major city as opposed to just the obstacle. So not just the water, but think of it as really Hamburg to Copenhagen. And likewise, so the model should be this line actually, because this is not conceived as just a base tunnel through the Alps. This is planned as a high-speed line from Lyon to Torino, the major cities. On the Italian side, it's hooking to an existing high-speed line from Torino to Milano and the rest of Italy. On the French side, obviously, toward Paris. They're marketing it internally, but by internally I mean planning, trying to think what the scope is, what goals we should be achieving, and also in public documents by talking about trip times between Paris and Torino, or even Paris, and even Paris and Milano. That is the right way to think about this. Likewise, this should be, instead of being thought of as just the Brenner Base Tunnel, they really need to think about it as a line from, I'm not even sure Innsbruck is large enough, I would really call it München to Verona. So the idea is a connection to a major city or a smaller city that is still a node on a fast classical network, which München is. The average speed from München to Berlin is because it's a mixed high-speed and legacy line. It might actually be the single fastest line in the world that is not an exclusive high-speed line. München to Berlin, the average speed is about 160. When you go through Halle. Now, this does make certain counterfactual assumptions on the punctuality of Deutsche Bahn, but then again, a punctual Deutsche Bahn would do it instead of in 4 hours on the exact same infrastructure. Would do it on something like 3 hours 20. So the delays are to some extent factored into the timetable anyway. So okay, so so Jordan, you're talking about not thinking about service. Okay, so yes and no. So just to point something out, I'm kind of building to saying that there should be these priorities and they should be thought of city to city or metro area to metro area. So that would be for Germany, Poland, there would be, I'm not sure this is the best way, it could be this way, but Berlin, but importantly needs to go north-south because you really need to leave the Stadtbahn in Berlin for S-Bahn and regional service, and go through the underused north-south main line. But anyway, whatever you do, it needs to do Berlin to Poznan. Poznan is not that big a city, but it is an actual metro, it's a legit metro area. I think it's 600,000 people, the metro area. And it connects to a high-speed network to Warszawa. So the idea is city size and connections. So this needs to be scoped as Berlin to Poznan. That is the scope of the EU here. And this is, and in particular, the other standard is, would this be built if the border were hermetically sealed? Call it whatever you want, Iron Curtain, pre-World War II, nationalism, whatever you want to call it. But the point is, Berlin to Dresden has strong domestic utility. It should be thought of exclusively in domestic terms as a result. Now, it's also not a very fast line, but it's not the worst. The average speed there, I want to say, is about 120 now that they've just reopened the Daznobahn. As people don't know, literally 3 months ago, did Germany finally quad-track this section, which I should probably do on Open Railway Map because I don't need to zoom in as much to see trains on the overlay that is designed for train. So this used to be a 4-track railway. It was reduced to 2 after the war as war reparations. There was not a priority to restore it because this was West Berlin and the rest of this was East Berlin, like East Berlin is Germany. So when the wall fell, during the wall, trains from Berlin to Dresden went to Ostbahn, to what is now Ostbahnhof, it was kind of the East Berlin Hauptbahnhof. And then when they opened Hauptbahnhof, they went like this, and then with a really weird, I think they went something like this. I don't remember the exact thing, but the point is that, or I guess they went like this. So they went as if they were going to Leipzig, and then they went on these curves at a low speed to get to the out-of-city Daznobahn, because the remains of the Daznobahn were just part of the West Berlin S-Bahn network, and then they were extended back here, like out of the city to here is S-Bahn. But anyway, they quad-tracked it. They finished the quad-tracking, and they opened the new line 3 months ago. So now trains go direct Hauptbahnhof like this to Dresden. They're not that bad. I mean, again, nobody's ever confusing this with high-speed rail, but if I do Berlin Hauptbahnhof to Dresden Hauptbahnhof, what do I get? Let's not do heute because I'm worried about time. Let's do in 2 days, and let's leave late in the morning because I don't like waking up early in the morning. So this, you might know, it is not ICE, because Dresden is very geographically peripheral within Germany. But it's an hour 39, which is not the worst. Again, is it high-speed rail? No, it got an isn't, but it's an average speed that's about 110, and this is not direct, it's not straight, it's about 110 or so kilometers an hour, maybe 120 if I'm underestimating how zigzaggy it is. It's not terrible. I mean, again, Berlin Halle is faster, Berlin Leipzig is faster, but it's this is not the end of the world, and this is something that I think Germany should be investing in to connect Dresden better to Berlin and Hamburg. But the point is, this is a strong domestic line. Yeah, pre-World War II. Yeah, no, Poznan was not on the German side of the border. Poznan. So yes, before World War One, it was a German city called Posen. However, the city Polonized. Um, the city Polonized to the point that on the eve of World War One, it had more Poles than Germans. The way that it worked in quite a lot of Poland and Czechia as well was that the cities were majority German, but they were surrounded by a majority Czech or Slavic countryside. But Poznan was actually majority Polish. Wrocław slash Breslau was entirely German. Katowice, like this area was kind of mixed, so they essentially did the referendum and then tried to gerrymander a border in the 20s to fit it, to best fit it. Danzig obviously was an entirely German city surrounded by a Polish countryside, so they had the jury-rigged Polish corridor that would keep it as a free city and a customs union with Poland so that it could be used as a Polish export border, but it was so unsatisfying that Poland just developed Gdynia. Like, Gdynia is an interwar development. Stettin was entirely German. I believe the only reason it became Stettin was because they wanted the border to be the Oder, but then Stalin decided he wanted Königsberg, that is say Kaliningrad, rather than Kurowatz. So to compensate Poland for the fact that Stalin wanted Kaliningrad, they gave them Szczecin. But anyway, no, this was a different country from this. And this was not even some kind of jury-rigged thing to give Poland access to the sea, like the Free City of Danzig, but this was genuinely Polish. But anyway, something like Berlin-Poznan is entirely international. There's essentially no domestic traffic that would ever use it. Dresden to Praga, same. This is being planned as a base tunnel, but then they're not investing after this. Czechia is doing this. This is grand. Another thing, like Praga to Plzeň is something that I can see Czechia eventually do. But question mark, and certainly on the German side, not really. So München to, or at least hooking into this line to Praga, I would call it an EU line. Connecting from Czechia to Poland, again, same thing. I mean, these lines exist. It's close enough between Ostrava and Katowice that their regional trains are just slow. This might need to change a bit because, so obviously this was the Iron Curtain. So this was actually a major line within Czechoslovakia to connect Praga and Brno with Bratislava. So doing it as this kind of system via Wien is a bit crayony. Slovakia is actually planning this to connect to Czechia. But figuring out a good Y between Wien, Bratislava, and Brno, I think, would be a good EU priority. Bratislava to Budapest, obviously. Bratislava, Wien. It's things that you should think of as connecting EU member states that are, or EU member states networks to each other, which Fehmarn doesn't do. It connects not quite with the German network, which is not particularly useful north of Hamburg, it's too slow, to the Danish network, which is being upgraded, but it's upgraded based on the idea that the maximum speed should depend on domestic Danish travel in a country that is just not very large. So this is what I'm saying when you're talking about city to city, and this is, again, this is probably a good subtraction. This is very speculative. Doing Stockholm to Mariehamn to Turku. It's not EU. Not at all. So this kind of what I'm thinking is the scope that you need to think about in terms of which lines would be EU priorities. Again, some of the things have been done already. I mean, the Y between Paris, London, and Brussels has been built. It's just being operated poorly. Now, before I get into operations, I do want to talk about the important one. I don't mean planning this, I mean this one. Um, the population of Holland is enormous. It's like 8 million people at this point, right? With the provinces of the Netherlands. Okay, so which year is this? 2023. So, why am I looking at this in Holland? This is Brabant. So, North Holland and South Holland are between them a lick under 7 million. Utrecht, which is spiritually Holland, is getting like this, and okay, I can't do control for selection. This is 1.4, this is 3.8, this is 3. Like these are more than 8 million people. And the line would go through Utrecht. So it's not even a question of, oh, I'm just adding things. No, I mean, essentially any connection between Holland proper and Germany would go like this. You can go direct, you can try to veer a little bit. This veers in order to connect to Den Bosch, and then from Den Bosch you can it's a very simple connection to Eindhoven. So essentially you're also incorporating the population centers of North Brabant into this system. A lot of people live here. It's about 12 million people with all the connections. And then this is a high-speed line that already exists, going to Frankfurt. Frankfurt to Mannheim is currently being planned because it is such a busy legacy line, they're making it fast. Mannheim to Stuttgart is a high-speed line. Not the fastest, but it's half an hour including the Deutsche Bahn factor. This can be done in under an hour. This is an hour and a few minutes, which with the Deutsche Bahn factor, it's morally a little less than an hour. Like, it's actually something that you could do, like, I mean, with Utrecht as the... Utrecht, I don't know whether the shit thing like this. You can do either, honestly. I'm skipping the larger Eindhoven is because it's more of a detour to go to Eindhoven. Like, you can do this, but essentially it forces you to make both stops. So it's one of the things that can be moved a bit. There is a lot of room there. You can do it via Arnhem or Nijmegen. The important thing, I think, is to make sure not to try to only hook to Duisburg, because entering via a slightly more southerly location gets you to Düsseldorf and Köln, and the importance of getting to Köln is that from Köln you get to southern Germany better. Whereas if you're trying to get to Hanover or Berlin, it's currently faster to Duisburg, but this is not that hard to build. There's some tunneling, but it's not insane amounts of tunneling, and these need to be German priorities anyway, and slowly they're being built. So they're not doing Dortmund to Bielefeld yet, they're doing Hanover to Bielefeld. They're thinking of Bielefeld to Hamm, because they're thinking a bit more than half an hour, a bit less than half an hour. But again, if you don't think that 25%, if you don't think that 25% schedule padding is written in the CDU Bible, you believe in the Holy Trinity of God the Father, Jesus Christ, God the Son, and the topic of the New Testament, or maybe call it the Middle Testament, and the topic of the New Testament and the Holy Ghost of CDU, Konrad Adenauer being like the latest incarnation of this, and then Axel Springer Media. So if you believe in that. If you believe that the 25% delays are written in that, then there's not much you can do, but they're not. The delays in Germany are an artifact of trying to run at not Swiss speeds on a debatably Swiss-style network. Like if you're trying to run fast, you need the fast lines to actually have dedicated tracks and not constantly be sharing tracks with slower trains, which they do. For example, between here and Halle. So this is a pretty fast line, but it's also sharing with a bunch of Deutschland ticket taking slower trains, one train delays the other trains. Um, so if they built a dedicated line, they would not just run at higher top speed, they would also get rid of the 25% schedule padding and turn it into 7% schedule padding. Um, and then, because the slower trains would not really interact with the fast trains as much here, it would also make this line, the fast line, faster because of less schedule padding. Same thing here. Ingolstadt to Nürnberg is fast. München to Ingolstadt is not. Is the way it currently works. Essentially, before the fast line from Ingolstadt to Nürnberg opened, the way people got from München to Nürnberg was via Augsburg, like this. There was no direct Ingolstadt-Nürnberg line. So when they built this, only it got moved to here to the more direct route, but this is still slow. And importantly, the faster intercity trains don't even stop at Ingolstadt. They just cruise through Ingolstadt, it's just not very high speed. And my point is, you build this, I don't want to call it the Rhine, the Mega Rhine high-speed rail, so Utrecht to through wherever, through Arnhem or Nijmegen or Den Bosch or even Eindhoven and Venlo, and then you get to Düsseldorf and Köln, and then you go, again, it's not exactly the Rhine, but you know what I mean, and then to Frankfurt, and then probably you would not have direct trains because the only way you're going to build a Frankfurt 21, like Stuttgart 21, is like this. So trains from both sides would enter from the west, but it's fine because this curve exists already. To do this, and then Mannheim and Stuttgart and München. This is fast, this is gonna happen, this should happen. Or further upriver to Basel, this is entirely crayon, unfortunately. And the thing is, what's the thing in these terms, this is kind of the point in which what service you're going to run is not the correct question, because the ridership here is going to be so high. Remember, Europe does not really have, and I'll answer this in a moment. Europe does not really have high-speed rail connecting to very large metropolitan areas, with the exception of Eurostar. Eurostar having the problems of security theater, creating artificial time, border theater, same, single file or maybe double file queuing onto a train with 16 cars, so they can have, so here they would have many access points, not just the two airplane style corridors. All of these things add time. Technically the trains do London-Paris in 2 hours 15, but you count how much extra time you need to leave for getting there early, and this overloads. There's a limited capacity of processing people, so these trains are very delayed, especially when more people are using them. German trains are just generally delayed. I mean, there's always a Deutsche Bahn factor, which, I mean, I keep joking about it, but it's not, it doesn't add hours. I mean, for the most part, Berlin to München is supposed to be 4 hours via Halle. In practice, it's going to be 4 or 5 or 10. It's not, I mean, yeah, from time to time you're hitting 5 or 6. It's very, very rare. Whereas with Eurostar, best I can tell, during the summer peak, for example, it's always incredibly delayed. So you add all of these things, and don't forget the Eurostar charges about twice as much per kilometer as domestic French and German trains. Yeah, the ridership is not going to be very large, and they've essentially defined their needs with this border theater and boarding theater and security theater, of which I need to mention the boarding theater is currently the limiting factor, so it's not even security issues that are written in some treaty or some psychopathic minister of the interior, but I repeat myself, demanding this. This is actually a problem of just poor rail design that is too airline brained. Yeah, Spain has that, but I thought that in Spain you need the security theater to get onto the station, but once you get into the station, you just get onto the platform. You don't have the additional airport-like boarding, whereas Eurostar is very airport-style, unfortunately. And my point is, because essentially this is not, no, it's not like Eurostar, or no, I'm wrong and it is like Eurostar. Oh, you do have both steps. It's like, I'm sorry. But yeah, so my point is that we have with Eurostar, it's the only place where you're getting to mega cities in Europe that connect by train. Because other than that, you have, I shouldn't say you, we have Paris to the Rhine-Ruhr, but this is slow because of the problems I mentioned before in Brussels. This is 4 hours. Paris to Köln. Thalys also charges about twice as much as domestic trains. It's the same. At this point, they rebranded Thalys to be the same brand as Eurostar. Because of that, it's poorly connected with the internal circulation of the Rhine-Ruhr, whereas ICEs are better at this. This is one of the things that if it were actually good, there would actually be capacity worries north of Paris and not just southeast of Paris. It is kind of a testament to the poor quality of cross-border rail here that this line connecting Paris with Lyon, Marseille, Montpellier, Toulon, Nice, but nowhere like that. Genève, Dijon, Chambéry, Saint-Étienne. That line is at capacity basically, and then the line that connects through, Lille, London, Brussels, Antwerpen, Holland, Liège, the Rhine-Ruhr is very much not. TGV ridership is basically Lyon Gare de Lyon, it's equal to Gare du Nord and Gare Montparnasse combined. It's about a bit more, I believe 30 million, 15 million, 15 million. And Montparnasse connects you to what? Tours, Le Mans, Rennes, Nantes, Brest at low speed, Angoulême, Bordeaux, Toulouse if you don't mind this taking 4 hours. I mean, and it's the same as again Lille, which is not that big, but Bruxelles, London, Old Holland, the Rhine-Ruhr. So anyway, I bring all this up because, especially up the Rhine, we're getting into a situation where we're going to get a line in places that can't be security theatered in any way. Thankfully, it's one of the reasons why Eurostar proper, so London to Köln is such an iffy proposition for doing them. Some private company says that they're going to do it, but then how are they going to get tracks in Köln? Köln is capacity concern. And so essentially, once you realize you can't do this kind of security theater, you're talking about a high-speed line that connects Holland, the Rhine-Ruhr, Frankfurt. Yeah, at some point, it's not a question of how much service you want to run, how much service you can run, is where I think this needs to be a priority. Like, this is even a line that it's one of these EU examples, again, like Hamburg to Copenhagen or Berlin to Poznan, because if you're thinking in terms of domestic Dutch needs, first of all, they're never more than 200. This was an error. This should not have been 300. And second, if you did it domestically, I mean, this doesn't serve particularly important parts of the Netherlands other than Den Bosch. And for Den Bosch and Eindhoven, the connectivity is so much more important than the speed given their distance to Holland. So just doing this, or this, or this, or this, or whatever you want, this is essentially the high-speed cross-border thing where probably I would say that the definition of the scope that's cross-border is Utrecht. Again, Dutch people tell me, is it pronounced Utrecht, like the German CH after a front roll, or is it Utrecht, like with Achlaut? From Utrecht, from whatever you want to call the city, Utrecht, or whatever you want to pronounce it in New York, to the nearest Rhine-Ruhr city, probably Duisburg if you want to be wrong, or maybe Düsseldorf or Köln is probably how I would scope it. In Valencia, okay, but we have the second queue in Barcelona and Madrid. Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah. Okay, so now you're asking me about the Köln Hauptbahnhof bottleneck. The answer is I don't know. I want to say that this is not going to contribute much to the bottleneck, because I understand that part of the problem with the bottleneck is traffic from the east is so much more, or rather interstate traffic from the east needs to be more delicately scheduled is more than interstate traffic to the west, because to the west you have these expensive slow trains from Belgium and France, and trains from Aachen, which is, like, don't want to judge, not a large city. And then, so that is where a lot of north comes from, to the point that some of the third trains from Duisburg or Düsseldorf to point south stop at on the Deutz side of Köln and not at Hauptbahnhof. That's where a lot of that comes from. So I'm kind of sanguine about about cross-border services from points west. This is the Deutz side. Let's see if I can actually find the station. Yeah, it's here. And then the idea is that this is how trains that skip Köln Hauptbahnhof go through Deutz. Like this. That's how we do it. On the Hohenzollernbrücke. I also don't know Köln well enough to say if there's some kind of demand for some kind of Köln S-Bahn tunnel on the model of Leipzig or Frankfurt or Stuttgart. So I may be underrating the extent of the problem. But my understanding is that better intercity service to point to in this direction is not where the problem triggers. Oh, it's a very wide range of G's and R's. So south of the Rhine is Utrecht. So south of the Rhine would be Utrecht. North of the Rhine would be Utrecht. Okay, I'm going to pretend that I'm from Amsterdam, so Utrecht. Okay. Alright, thanks. Interesting to say ch is harsher than sh, but again, I'm a native speaker of a language that has ch and not sh, to the point that I accidentally speak with achlaut, and then people don't understand what I'm saying. It's not that they peg me as someone from a weird part of the country or part of the world when I say things like Reichsspanner as opposed to Reichsspanner. They just don't understand what I'm saying. Oh yeah, in the game Social Democracy, you can either fund the Reichsbanner and kill and punch Nazis, or you can defund the Reichsbanner and get money to actually beat the Nazis in the ballot box. And people don't understand what I'm saying because it's Reichsbanner, not Reichsbanner. And I guess people expect foreigners to speak English with some German words, or speak German to speak extremely standard German, but anyway, or with an extremely standard accent. I mean, without any regionalisms, if that makes sense. I say standard, not like perfect grammar or anything. So yeah, this is what I'm thinking about these. So when we try to think about the scope of an EU network, we need to think about city to city, because that's how people travel. A passenger rail rider, and this is all about passenger rail because by American or Russian or Chinese standards, I don't care what they think they're doing, we do not have freight rail. And where we do have freight rail, it's not across water, it's across mountains. From that perspective, what matters is city to city. So it's nice that there's the Brenner Base Tunnel, but for passenger rail purposes, Innsbruck doesn't mean very much. It really needs to be thought of as something that goes from München to Verona. And similarly, with Switzerland, again, it's more complex because they're just used to slow trains. Or something like Zürich to Stuttgart. Germany would never build a line in this direction for domestic purposes. There's nothing in this direction. And likewise, Switzerland, setting aside the fact that it's not building high-speed trains, it wouldn't be investing much in the direction beyond Winterthur. Like Winterthur, sure, there's the tunnel that they're building for capacity, which this could use, but beyond Winterthur, I mean, Schaffhausen is just not that important, I'm sorry. So that would be where trying to do some kind of EU coordination from Stuttgart to Zurich to do this in an hour, not in however long it takes now, would be useful. So think about this as like an addition to domestic things that need to happen, like Utrecht, like here, like including Bremen, or high speed 2, including the connections to the north and not just the Midlands. I'm kind of surprised they actually cancelled high speed 2 north of the connections north of Birmingham, just because of how Northerners are viewed as kind of hero voters, and subsidizing the north is considered important in British politics. But I expect them to eventually get there. Maybe it'll take another generation because they need this to open, and then people from the north demand why they don't get that. But I expect this to eventually happen. This, in case the squiggles are unclear, is a planned connection on a classical line at low speed. This used to be part of the high speed 2 plan in the early 2010s. It got descoped in favor of just going at high speed. I mean, as far north as Leeds and southern Lancashire, like Manchester, Liverpool, at some point. But this is not a crown that I made up. Eventually, yeah. I'm talking about EU action, which means think about these timelines anyway. The EU is not a fast-acting institution. But anyway, so if we're thinking about that scope, so city to city, let's try to figure out what is needed right now. And I don't know where I'm going to write this down, so what is a good place to write down the scope? It's on a blog post on Bloggens right now. So I might just do it as a document. So EU lines, city to city, major city, or high speed, or domestic, I should say. Node. Okay, so before we start saying good, bad, let's just think about maybes. So Irish Sea Tunnel. Obviously nobody's building to Holyhead, because Holyhead is essentially only a ferry terminal. So that would be Dublin to Crewe, I guess. Or am I misremembering which side of the junction? No, it is Crewe. It is Crewe. Here. So Crewe is an example of a major junction. So Crewe, Holyhead, Dublin, Irish Sea Tunnel. That concludes the United Kingdom. Bordeaux to Dax, as I said, is happening. So let's start to say Bordeaux, Dax. I believe it's Irogne, the connection on the Spanish side. Or is it, or do they need more than Iron to get to San Sebastian? I don't remember the Basque. I also don't understand why the Basque is taking forever. I believe it is like this, right? It's Iron, not Iron, right? No, it's Iron. Interesting. I don't know how much I would count Pamplona. This is essentially the main purpose of Pamplona, honestly, is that if the network as I drew exists, but without the Pamplona connection, this route to Madrid is maybe the same speed, the same trip times, or maybe only marginally faster than this route. And the point is to get to the point that, no, I'm doing like this. The point is to understand that we're talking about an Greek. Oh, Irunia in Basque. Iron. Okay. Okay, it is Iron, not Iron. Sorry. The point of the Pamplona bypass is to get from here to Madrid as fast as possible, so that there shall be no temptation to connect Paris to Madrid via the LGV Sud-Est. The point is to get traffic off the LGV Sud-Est as much as possible, because capacity problems. And getting through the LGV Sud-Europe Atlantique, which is and will always be below capacity. So that is the port. That is the point of the Pamplona bypass. So Pamplona I'm just going to call this line Pamplona bypass. So bypass Irún, Zaragoza, Zaragoza to bypass the Basque country for Paris, Madrid trains. As I said, this is, for all intents and purposes, happening. So best I can say is Badajoz, just because it's literally being built by Spain. So Madrid, Badajoz, Lisbon. What? Oh, okay. For some reason I thought 228 was. Oh, it need 227. Okay, sorry. Already domestically planned. I'm forgetting whether it's under construction. You think Pamplona Bilbao? Yes, you can. Yeah, it also has some domestic utility, and Spanish construction costs being what they are, they might do it anyway. But I'm thinking. But I mean, I don't want to have to just ding Spain because they're building domestically questionable lines that can be then repurposed internationally. Which is also why I'm doing Madrid to Badajoz to Lisbon. Do we want to count Porto to Braga to Vigo? Vigo, Braga, Porto, which is not a particularly strong line. On this side, as I said, this is happening, so we're talking Nice to Genoa. I would not stop this at Ventimiglia. Genoa to Milano is happening. Do we want to talk about Milan to Zurich? Which is essentially just some minor bypasses to match passenger rail speed with base tunnels. Verona to München. Let's go. How do you call it? EU HSR scope. Yeah. What else do we have? So we have these lines. Venezia to Trieste is domestic, and I think might even be happening. I don't remember. Trieste to Ljubljana to Zagreb is not at all. We should probably add. So I don't know what's the status of Serbia at this point, because Serbia is one of these places that kind of wants into the EU, but doesn't want geopolitically into the EU, but is not sure. So it, I think, just sent something to Ukraine to make a statement that it's not an entirely Putinist country. It's one of these cases where they can't really let them into the EU. Wait, I'm missing. I thought I included Barcelona, Valencia. There's Barcelona, Valencia here. It's on the map. Then I'm not calling it international because it's because you guys are still one country. But I'm sorry, but this line is on the map and it is domestic. Anyway, again, the situation of Serbia is kind of weird because I don't think they're being let into the EU. They're decently advanced into the EU, I think. They're their second most advanced among the applicants, right? It's Montenegro and then Serbia. And Serbia, and the problem with Serbia is garbage rule of law, and also it doesn't matter what kind of reforms they do on the acquis. Vucic is pro-Putin and will be Orban 2.0. And the EU would not want that with veto power. Certainly, if we're talking about just economic issues, then Zagreb to Novi Sad to Belgrade, very strong line. I mean, not okay. I say very strong. It's not very. I mean, this is like Balkan population density. It's not. It's not Holland to the Rhineland, which is one of these "why haven't they done this already? I don't understand" situations. But this is something that I can see happen. It is more geopolitical, as I understand it, than anything else. The same geopolitics that also keeps Bosnia out, because Bosnia essentially needs the assent of the Republika Srpska to make any moves, and the Republika Srpska isn't doing that. No, Valencia is not in Catalonia. Valencia is a separate city, separate province, which considers its language to be distinct from Catalan, even though it kind of isn't. Serbia's Farage UK and EU relations, okay, but the Farage UK and EU relations, like Orban is literally vetoing something that he said he wouldn't veto, and this is why Ukraine doesn't have money to fund the war right now. It's going to run out of money in about 3 or 4 weeks. I believe the timing of it running out of money is not just the best time, but just the worst time relative to the Hungarian election. Kind of, yeah. Bosnia, like the amount of neocolonialism, the amount of Western European neocolonialism in Bosnia is kind of disgusting. I mean, remember that the Republika Srpska essentially got convicted of genocide. I mean, Serbia was, but it was on behalf of, with the support of the Republika Srpska, and they got most of what they wanted. So, yeah. It's one of these, Israel is committing genocide and the ICJ should follow ICJ precedent for countries that committed genocide and give the settlers veto power over the West Bank situation. But anyway, certainly up to Zagreb. Also into Austria, which is where quite a lot of Croats and Slovenes work as, I'm not going to call them guest workers because guest workers implies certain migration status that they don't have because they are EU migrants, but it's probably best to think of them as EU workers. I don't know how to pronounce it. Let's not make any accommodations of Austrian accents. Graz to Wien is happening. Not at the speed that I would like, but it's happening. So Graz is the connection point. So I'm going to do Graz to, and it's also going, and then to Klagenfurt. Like this is the tunnel. So do we want to do Klagenfurt to Italy and then explain that it lands in, I don't even know where to call this because it's just a connection point, it's not even a node. Udine is not the right one. So I'm not sure what to call this. This looks, I mean, I honestly could call it Udine if people really want. Yeah, but I mean, more importantly, Austria is wealthy. So I'm just gonna say Verona München. I didn't do Ljubljana. So Trieste to Ljubljana to Zagreb to Novi Sad, and then we said Ljubljana to Graz on the map, or Zagreb. Let's just do Ljubljana / Zagreb to Graz, and then Udine to Klagenfurt, where it's one of these things where the connections are medium speed, but it's one of these things where medium speed is not that useful. München to Salzburg, honestly, is useful, but it's one of the things where both sides think that medium speed is fine. Paris to Frankfurt, You start from around Metz, or whatever you call it. Saarbrücken is just not important enough for domestics. This is actually one of these cases. And also Strasbourg to Karlsruhe. This is medium speed. And Mulhouse to Basel. So Strasbourg to so let's do, I don't know what to even call it. I could just call it LGVS and people will understand. LGVS to Saarbrücken to Frankfurt, and it can go through Mainz if people really want. I prefer that to going through Mannheim because I'm paranoid over capacity. Strasbourg, to, what do we even call it? Is it just the Rheinbahn? The Rheintal? No. Badener Bahn? Badische? What's the name of this? Is it Badische Bahn? Badische Hauptbahn. It's this one. Wait, what are you asking me? I have no idea. I honestly don't know Graz. I don't know anything in Austria except a handful of things about Vienna, and I emphasize a handful to be able to answer that question. As I said, Holland to, so Utrecht to, so honestly I would call Brussels to Leuven and Brussels to Antwerpen examples of this, because they are mostly, there are lines that are kind of good enough if you only care about domestic. And then HSL4 to Aachen to Köln, and then Utrecht to Düsseldorf / Köln. Make sure I'm spelling it correctly. I'm kind of not going to want to include, this is not that important. That could be a subtraction. It could include Ingolstadt to Prague, but to Plzeň to Praga, but again, not the most important thing. So Dresden Prague is mostly happening, as I said. This can be included. Okay, is it it's Plzeň, not Plzeň, right? Which means I need to remember how to write it. Yes, it's Plzeň. Let's just copy paste. I want to deal with things beyond what I can do with numerical keyboard. To Plzeň to Prague. And then we want Hamburg to Copenhagen. Wait, it's C. Copenhagen with K's only. Like Danish and Swedish don't respell hard C's this case. And we want Berlin to Poznan. Again, I'm going to need to do this together, but you know what I mean. Then Berlin to Poznan. And then, what is it, Brno to Bratislava to Wien Y, and then we want Bratislava to Budapest. What are we missing? Does Luxembourg get a line? I mean, I would not call Luxembourg barely over 100,000. I honestly think of Luxembourg as the center of a metro area. That's the entire country. So 500 or whatever. I mean, honestly, I don't know about Luxembourg. It's so weird because they can connect with LGV Est. It's just on the German side, it's a bit weird because kind of the obvious connection is via Saarbrücken. And if for some reason someone hates Saarbrücken and wants to go via Luxembourg and Trier, I can see that happen as well, but this is going to be more expensive and more construction. So it's one of the things that can go either way. if for some reason you need a bypass of the Rhine, if this gets too busy, then yeah, I can do something like this, like Luxembourg to Metz, to be able to get to Strasbourg or something. I mean, it's one of these weird bypasses that I don't even know to what extent it's useful. But you can cry on if you want. Bratislava to Budapest. I guess it's Győr in between, like the city, but not the main. I'm gonna say it's like this and not just Budapest Győr, but I don't actually know internal. What's it called? Internal Hungarian intercity rail issues. To be able to tell you whether it's something that, how to scope that. And also the EU is going to need to give a post-Orban Hungary so much money just to make sure they don't relapse. Now I know you guys did talk to me about Romania before, and I don't want to skip Romania, so I actually want to do Romania. And then yeah, we can do Belgrade if we think that what's it called? If we think that Serbia can at some point be more reliable. I'm gonna mostly draw it on the. So this is pure crayon. I don't actually know what's been planned, and I'm mostly just gonna draw a straight-ish line between the railway and the highway, and then I'm going to make sure it goes via Novi Sad, because that is a legit city, and there's already some planning. I mean, there's planning between Serbia and Hungary where they think that if they bring in Chinese companies to poke the EU in there, then it's going to give them a lower cost, and obviously it doesn't. So whatever it is, got a city center station, and then you go. Which is the Novi Sad? I actually don't know going this, but I'm just gonna draw it like this, and then I believe this is happening. Belgrade to Novi Sad, and then like this, and then Budapest to so Novi Sad to Subotica. So it goes all the way up to Subotica. The domestic plans that are actually happening, more or less, and by actually happening, I mean, let's not talk about the levels of corruption involved in all of this. And then in Budapest, and then in Hungary, it goes down to Szeged. So in Szeged and Subotica don't quite face each other, kind of awkwardly. So you either go like this, or you essentially split frequencies between cities that are not large enough that the frequency split would be particularly advisable. So if I'm gonna just draw something and expect that I'm not going to actually write down how much it should be costing, because this is not a reliable assumption. Serbia it is in the EU, and I also don't want to deal with the exact. Do we count it at again Szeged, like just Szeged to Subotica, or from near Szeged to near Subotica, or what? I think it's Subotica. I don't think it's Subotica. I don't think it's the penal stress is Polish. Yeah, there is. Is there a norm? The norm honestly depends on what EPP people think is moral. Like, there are so many things that people say that you can never do, or are impossible, or even politically impossible, and then as soon as there's some kind of crisis that makes that seem like a solution, suddenly all the opposition vanishes. Like how people said that there were never going to be EU wide stimulus, and then Corona happened, and it happened. Or there's never going to be EU bonds, there's never going to be Euro bonds. Well, that's how they're trying to fund the Ukraine war. They just didn't expect. I mean, Orban specifically said that as long as the money doesn't come from Hungary, he's not going to veto, and then he vetoed. And nobody in the EU has heard of the expression constitutional hardball. So, I don't know what the best way to get from Warsaw to Lviv is, so please bear with me as I cram it. So obviously you go east, I'm assuming you go southeast, and then you just pick your right of way. This is a place that doesn't have a lot of highways. I mean, okay, you go through, so you can go through Lublin like this. Chelm is not that important, and I'm sorry to every collector of Ashkenazi folktales about the wise men of Chelm and of Herschela. But Chelm is just not that important. Honestly, this line, the Auschwitz line, is not that important either. I mean, essentially it's a bypass of Katowice for people from Ostrava and points west to Krakow and points east, which I don't want to offend Ukrainians too much, but not the most important city pair. This needs a tunnel, honestly, so might as well assume the tunnel goes in a direction that pairs well with other things and go here. So, let's just get rid of this, it's not important. Like, Holocaust tourism is oh, hi Pala, and I mean, I'm not gonna be doing this for much longer anyway. Yeah, I understand. So anyway, there's this. I'm just gonna briefly do Romania. So there's Budapest, Debrecen is where I need to start, and then how about I, instead of starting in Debrecen, start in Constanza and then go west from Constanza and deal with Yasha another time. So Constanza, how do I draw it? You go out like this, and then you just essentially go straight along. This is, you might be able to develop, whenever you have straight railways, especially state railways that are not high speed or in areas that don't have very good rail infrastructure, it means that the area is flat, so you can just do whatever you want. Bucharest requires some kind of running infrastructure, but might as well spend the money. Do this, then I'm never sure where to go beyond that, and this is not necessarily optimized because there's Ploiești and then Brașov. Like, the idea was to get to Brașov with not as much tunneling as possible, but it might actually be correct to go via either Ploiești or near Ploiești and then do something like this. And yeah, it's tunnels, but it's the Carpathians. You need tunnels, I'm sorry. So you do this, and then from Brașov, we're going via Targu Mureș, a place where not a lot of people actually speak Romanian. Essentially I mean, I did try to optimize the tunneling when I drew this a little bit, but only a little bit. I think Targu Mureș doesn't even get Targu Mureș, not Mureș. Doesn't get a city center station. Cluj obviously does. Something like this they drew, and you can tell that here the lines are very squiggly, very curvy, because they didn't have a lot of railway budget in late 19th century. The end of the Kingdom of Hungary, of Austria-Hungary, and then they ended up. And then this is in a very hilly terrain, so it's going to be expensive. Oradea, and then go via Debrecen, and then just go from Debrecen to Budapest as fast as you can. You can tell that there's a little bit of a curve here because Oradea and Debrecen don't face each other either. And then, so you want to avoid the national park, this maybe. And then we just go this and find whichever we prefer. I don't think what I drew is optimized, but it's fine. That's not what we're doing. here. And there's this, and then there's Yasha, but Yasha is domestic, so it's not an EU thing. No. Change gauge, unless you want to convert the entirety of the thing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there were Kanonenbahnen, but once you go into actual mountains, suddenly the routes are not Kanonenbahnen. Like actual mountains. And then again, we could add Yash later, but I mean, for what, Moldova? I mean, to show how the lines would get into Moldova, like Yash to Chisinau. I mean, I'm pretty sure the only way Moldova is entering the EU is part of the EU is if it's part of Romania. It could be some cohesion funds, but that's not what we're talking about. There's Bulgaria, which I haven't drawn because mostly things are so Serbia dependent. Or maybe something about Sofia to Thessaloniki. Might not be the worst idea. It's also not the best though. So I'm just going to write Bucharest and so I need to copy paste like this so that it will render well because the commas don't really work. So to Debrecen, I'm just going to write Cluj to Debrecen to Budapest because these two things, Debrecen, Budapest, Debrecen, Debrecen and Bucharest and Cluj are domestic things that probably get funded by the EU anyway, but it's cohesion and not international, so they're different planning. Maxims, but it's basically these, what I'm saying. And in terms of prioritization, by far the most important is Paris to Frankfurt. This is actually pretty important as well because it's short, so the benefits are not as high, but the costs are very low. And then Utrecht to Düsseldorf and Köln. Like these are the most important as far as the EU is concerned, and then it's obviously not cohesion because it's in rich countries in the EU. It's in rich EU members. Do I have any guidance for coordinated track sharing? Even the express tracks carry 13 TPH already. I fail to see the problem. Do the expresses make any intermediate stops between Amsterdam and Utrecht? It depends. If it's easy to sextuple, then you sextuple. If it isn't, just treat the intercities as something like fast regionals, as the fastest regionals. They split between Zuid and Central. Yeah, but no, I'm asking, okay, the intercities run non-stop, but do the express regionals make stops? What do you mean 50-50? Oh, you mean in funding? Yeah, but provincial funding in China is always kind of weird just because of where the money is ultimately coming from. But anyway, I think these are the main ones. Did I do Berlin to Poznan? Yeah. So I would say that, the things I would bold as the most important priorities are this, and this. Maybe this is important. Maybe this. I can do these. And yeah, it is a very, I don't know what to call it, EU6 almost centric, but that's where, the broad Rhine Valley is where quite a lot of population density and economic production is. So it's not that surprising. And if you're trying to cost these, and I'm just going to try to figure out some costs, so first order cost estimates, and then stop. Things around Germany will cost as if it's German, not Dutch. Because Dutch planning is weird, and essentially the only Dutch high-speed rail thing is in such a compromised situation in other ways that this would be different. I'm also assuming that they're not going to get the EU design build bug, which is a problem. So this, it'll be from Köln maybe even. So like with these connections, it's almost 200, like 180, 200. No, it's not. I would not call it Carolingian in Europe, and I really hate the expression blue banana because remember the concept of the blue banana was specifically a French concept critiquing France for being too capital centric. So the blue banana includes most of England, includes England as far northwest as Manchester and Liverpool, but does not include Paris. It's also a concept that has held up like garbage. In fact, since then, well, the last few decades, economic growth by region has essentially tracked the country, not the region. So Milano is richer than Napoli, but it's always been richer than Napoli, and Italian stagnation also affected Milan. Conversely, within Germany, the fastest growing parts are not the blue banana, they're East Germany, and especially Berlin. Oh, the domestic express service to Schiphol site. Okay, so they do stop at Palma, and Amstel. Then I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, you could potentially slot them together, but then it's a little more delicate. And you could just say, okay, the Europatact, or whatever you want to call it, the Europatact, only goes as far as Utrecht, from Utrecht to Amsterdam or Utrecht to Rotterdam. We disclaim any attempts to keep the timetable. Yeah, you might need to wait for a domestic regional if things aren't okay, and that's a 5-minute delayed deal. Carolingian Europe doesn't align with a lot of things either. Yeah, the meme is that Berlin is dragging the country down, yes. Am I going to tell you that CES was lying to you about Berlin? No, I'm going to tell you that CES was lying to you about everything. Söder, I mean, I'm glad that he has a personality, unlike Merz, but he sure does love not running Bavaria, no, not running Bayern very well. Yeah, yeah, Carolingian Empire, specifically northern Italy and roughly Germany west of the Iron Curtain. Yeah, there was a kingdom called Saxony, but that kingdom was not current Saxony. It did not go to Leipzig. It was in Leipzig and Dresden, and it was much west than that. It was much farther west than that. This is why we have like so many Saxonies in Germany. Okay. But anyway, so it's this line. It's about, I'm gonna call it 190 kilometers. So that's 190 km. I'm going to look at something, and then I am going to be very unhappy about my country. It's not here, so I need to go here and then add it. Yeah. 60 million euros per kilometer in good terrain. So 60 million euros times 190 or 180, whatever you want to call it. Let's call it 100.5 billion. I'm pretty sure that B is an Americanism. Euro. Anyway, Brussels to Antwerp, Belgian costs are much lower. And I am going to, so Brussels, so this is about 50. This bypass, it's about, it's also certain, no, I believe it's going to be something like 40 and then another, and like 35 or something like that. So it is, or 30, and then it's this dock, so this is 40 km, this is 30 km. I'm pretty sure that I closed down the Belgian coast, but I can put them back up. And then let's do the highest of them. So this is about 40 something. This is with tunnels, these would need tunnels. It's about, let's say 40, but this is dollars. and if we do it in euros, this is the PPP, right? This is an old PPP, right? It'd be what, 30? Maybe a bit less than 30? Let's give it 30. So it's going to be this, and then you need capital M because otherwise it's considered 1,000 is the problem. And this is 1.2 billion euros. Slesvig-Bayerische Hauptbahn. It's barely even worth counting. It is very short. It's something like this. It's like 30 of that. It's still German, but it's still 30. And then 30 km. I'm gonna do this and be very unhappy with my country again. And then I believe this is gonna end up being about 200. Because you start at Frankfurt, start a bit west. It's about 200, I believe. Maybe 210 because I didn't include some French lines. Let's just pretend that 10 are not there. And then I'm not sure about Milano-Ziri, honestly. I'm going to skip that. Verona-München, which is kind of in competition with Milano-Ziri. I believe we need to talk about Verona to Bolzano or to Trento. I believe it's just Bolzano. So this is going to be about 130 on the Italian side. And then on the German side, it's going to be Innsbruck to, this is about, this is to Rosenheim, this is about 100, and then this is 160. So I'm just going to say, and then Italy, actually Italian coasts on high-speed rail are not good. This is really bad. And I'm just gonna give them German coasts maybe, so like Milan-Bologna isn't as bad, but still. So it's like 50, 60 million euros per kilometer. Again, in Germany, I honestly don't know why this is so expensive because it has, it only has many nature coasts, not merged. Because, I mean, the line to Ulm, I guess, is more than 60, but it is half in tunnel. So I don't know why it's 60, not 50. It could be that it's just one bad line. I don't know. If we give it 50, or maybe 50 as if it's 300 rounded up, then it is going to be 15 billion euro. Sorry, the numerical keypad was being a bit difficult. So it's this. These are the core lines. It's mostly this and this are going to be the cost generators. We're talking 30-ish. Milano-Ziri, I'm not sure. Obviously, this is going to be incredibly expensive. The hard part is being funded already. This might be an internal German line, is why I'm not making it a priority. In Hamburg and Copenhagen, again, this line has been, it's one of those frustrating things where the hard part is being done, and then they're not doing the easy part. So the easy part is 130 on the German side, and this is partly being done. I'm just going to call it 100 on the Danish side, and I'm not sure so if it's Germany 100 or maybe 130 km Denmark because it's squigglier. I can't not give it Hamburg coast. This is 8, and Denmark is going to be cheaper. Maybe it's Swedish coast or something. Sweden, high-speed rail coasts. This is new. Yes, this is 11 billion euros, or a bit, maybe 10 billion euros for Ostlänken, so that is Södertälje to Linköping. That is not that cheap. We're talking also about the Germanish cost, like at 60-ish per kilometer. So I can't do a not Germany discount on this, unfortunately. So this is going to be something like 15, 16 billion euros. Which, bear in mind, I mean, that money is essentially already being spent on the Fehmarn Belt anyway. So it's not that exciting. I think it's going to be here. So, okay, when it's doing this, it's not 30, we're talking, it gets to 50 very quickly, and these are going to be expensive because mountains. But a core system of 50 is something the EU has. I'm sorry. I mean, the EU managed to boo Eurobonds for 90 for Ukraine. Military spending is generally a bigger item than transportation spending, but not by as much of a margin as you think. I believe transport spending at all levels is something like 2% of GDP. Capital? I don't know. I think that's about it for now. Do people have any final questions? I'm not going to do every single line, especially the ones that I genuinely can't coast, because Irish Sea Tunnel I can't coast, I'm sorry. These I can. Like, the Balkan lines I think I can. The value of the exchange rate issues are going to be annoying, but it's doable, and the same is true of Poland. This is just short. And the cohesion Romania-Hungary line is going to be a lot of money, but I mean, it's not infinitely long. I mean, Bucharest to Budapest is 800 the way you drew it. And yeah, it's 800 in one country that has insane construction costs and has had insane construction costs since before Orban, and one country that has okay construction costs, like the metro expansion inclusion in Bucharest, but countries that don't have a high-speed rail experience can very easily get the design build bug on this, like Poland, and get high costs. I mean, so these 800 might well be like 30 billion euros. What's the deal with airplane food? Everything on an airplane needs to be fireproof, so they can't make the food fresh, because anything that makes the food fresh is a fire hazard. Anything else? Ideally, things that are on topic. Is there a way to get Spanish costs? Probably, but I don't know. I would call it French costs more than Spanish costs, honestly. I mean, honestly, you just need a good internal bureaucracy for that, and the EU is especially garbage at that. Because the EU doesn't like thinking of itself as a state. Again, it's one of those things that, is China cheaper than that? No, China is more expensive. China is probably comparable to the more expensive things in Germany. But I mean, German lines so far are cheaper than China relative to dollar. Again, the Hamburg-Hannover line is an exception. But no, China is not actually cheaper in PPP terms. People pretend that it's cheaper because they look at exchange rates, and also they want to tell themselves the story of China being cheaper. There are no economies of scale when you build infrastructure, and then China builds on viaduct. Nearly the entire Beijing-Shanghai route was built on viaduct, rather than on the ground or on earthworks. It's a common problem in Asia. India has the same problem. Japan built the Tokaido Shinkansens, not tunnel parts, on earthworks, but all of the newer lines are built on viaducts, and the costs are high. Fun fact, the most expensive place to build high-speed rail or metro infrastructure that is claimed by China is Taiwan. Taiwan has higher costs than China. I mean, Hong Kong even more, but Hong Kong is not building high-speed rail. Anything else? Doing this to do at least some kind of counter Matryoshka. No, Taiwan is done. Hong Kong's geography is not the reason why subways cost almost like it's New York there. About vendors for tech, just do the entire EU supply chain, that's fine. This is not a problem that we have here, vendors for tech. For real tech, I don't mean AI tech or software tech in general, where one of it's not the reason there's no international boycott of Israel on this, but one of the subsidiary. I mean, the main reason just nobody involved in that part of the economy gives a crap. But the subsidiary reason is Israel has a better tax sector than anywhere in Europe. Nobody. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, this is not where the traditions of high speed rail matter very much. Just build city to city. It's kind of weird, especially when you get to Eastern Europe, the distances between the cities get long enough that the Germany versus France question loses value, and then the key remaining Western European cross-border connections. So again, especially Holland, especially Utrecht to Rhine-Ruhr, it's something where you're kind of forced to be German in your speed because there are too many cities that you have to stop in. It is to some extent a population density artifact. Not entirely, but it is to some extent. Anyway, anything else before we break? Yeah, so France without the lack of EMU, essentially, they're not going to do TGVs outside France. It's essentially French protectionism. Now, Macron unfortunately has a certain idea of France, and the certain idea of France is not a province in an EU where should rolling stock be bought just on the open market. I'm not talking about operations. I'm not talking about whether, and the problem is the EU is going to be very reluctant to run things itself, which is fine. I mean, they can do the things like the Utrecht to Rhine-Ruhr line. You can have ITSEs, you can have whatever NS wants to call itself. Is there a reason to buy Europe? I mean, other than, Shinkansen are not going to be homologated here unless they stop being Shinkansen. Again, you can do that, but it's not the most necessary thing. I'm very much trying to think what the EU could do, not what an EU that decided to stop letting Putin Putin and Trump have veto powers over its policy did. I'm trying to stay within what EPP thinks is at least something that activists could push for, rather than hi, we're the EU, we're a state now, you will learn the language. Yeah, valid. But honestly, on the core lines, it's something where it is actually an interesting question. Maybe I should do it in another video about how to have good timetabling without having an Europäische Bahn or SSF or something like that run everything, where essentially you figure out the paths and then you divvy them up between operators. I mean the EU flag, and I don't mean blue and I don't mean yellow and blue. I mean this one. Anyway, I think I'm gonna stop here. Thanks, and I know I draw this on people with relatively short notice. Thanks for watching. I think I'll do this again. I don't know when. I mean, I'm assuming I'm gonna do the usual days, but we'll figure this out. I don't know if I'm gonna do it twice a week again, ever. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment on social media and Discord and propose ideas. I listen. So thank you, and ciao ciao. How do I stop this?